It is set to be one of the biggest free agency periods of all time here in the Hungry Jacks NBL. So it gives us great pleasure to welcome you to Marketplace as we begin the search and the hunt towards free agency. Realistically, it starts now. I'm Jack Heverin. We've got so much to talk about. Great to have Derek Rucker alongside me. Derek, it is going to be a really, really busy next few weeks.
It certainly is, and I suppose this is part of the competition now. When we want that type of growth that we have seen commercially with the NBL, well, this is a part of it. Players want to see and look for their best opportunities, and right now there are some great opportunities and some very good players out there on the market.
We're going to take a look at each team one by one. We'll give you a look at their depth charts as well. But of course, it wouldn't be free agency without basketball's #1 newsbreaker, Olgun Uluc from ESPN. Olgun, you've had your work cut out already. There's a lot happening.
So much happening. We've already had options picked up, options declined, re-signings. It's all going to happen. This free agency is going to be a lot of fun. A lot of high-level Australians and New Zealanders on the market. And then I think we're going to see a fun little swap, a little carousel of some of those role players too. So there's going to be a lot going on. We've got a lot of really significant free agents.
The dates are very important. March 27 is when it all really kicks off. Options can be confirmed. Then the following day at 9 a.m, the free agency list and the salary values will be circulated to each of the clubs. And then on March the 30th at 9 a.m, it all kicks off and free agency is officially open. And we've got some big names that will feature prominently. Derek, someone you've watched a lot of this season is Will McDowell-White.
Yep.
What happens next for him?
The #2 point guard in this competition behind Derek Walton Jr., but Will plays as an Australian, so his value is even higher. Look, obviously New Zealand will want to retain him, but there are going to be point guard openings. I'm sure Brisbane will be looking for a true point guard. The Sydney Kings may want to make a change. Adelaide, there's all types of possibilities for Will, and he's in a great position because he has shown finally he is starting to be the player that everyone hoped that he could be, and he can lead a team deep into a playoff run.
Olgun, there's so much interest in him. I think it's fair to say that he is one of the biggest names right now.
He definitely is. I'm told that 8 teams around the league are preparing to show interest in McDowell-White. There's only 2 who I'm told have not really shown that interest. That's ILLAWARRA and Cairns. And ILLAWARRA has, their point guard and shooting guard locked up, and Cairns I don't think has the money to make that sort of recruitment. But McDowell-White as a local is going to be the primary guy as far as point guards this off season. The New Zealand Breakers are a team that they're not really known for spending big on retaining guys, and so that's something that McDowell-White's people are very aware of. But he does like Moni Mayor. He does want to stay, but look at, we're here at Kudos Bank Arena. I expect the Sydney Kings to be one of the big markets to push for him. And don't be surprised if the Brisbane Bullets come in, like Ruck said. They need a point guard, and I think they're one that's going to make a significant push for him.
What about Keanu Pinder? Now playing overseas for the next period of time, is that concerning, Ruck? If you're a Cairns Taipans fan, are you worried that Keanu's now getting the look at the overseas dollar, let alone what's available in this league?
If I was a Taipans fan, I could have the unrealistic hope that he's making extra money now, so he'll take less money next season. That is not going to happen. In fact, I think it's going to take a lot of money just to keep him in our competition, guys. I think Keanu, now that Xavier Cooks is leaving, Keanu becomes that #1 guy available in the Australian market. And I would think the big clubs will be going after him big time. I would think it would be great for Perth to get a hold of him. Melbourne United, look, any team could benefit with him, but it's just a matter of what's available in that salary cap. And I would love to know what a player of Keanu's magnitude actually commands on the market, guys. I
spoke to a few teams who are preparing to make a pitch for him, and they're under the impression that the starting price is extremely high. It's probably the highest number I've heard this off-season. Wow. And so that's going to be the expectation going into free agency. There are a lot of, those big market teams are going to show interest in Keanu Pinder. That's expected. One thing I wouldn't be surprised at is if he ends up exploring some of those other high-level options outside the NBL, like you said. And so one thing is he's in the process, hopefully, of getting his Bahamian citizenship. If that happens, then that opens a whole heap of EuroLeague options for him. So I wonder if that could affect him potentially staying in the NBL.
And then, of course, there are the big names at this time of year are always proactive, Olgun. Melbourne and Perth and the Sydney Kings now with the loss of Xavier Cooks in particular. These big teams are prominent this time of year.
And so that means they just have a ton of money to spend. I look at the Sydney Kings. I imagine they're going to be in the market for McDowell-White. You know, they've had a really close look at him. His agent was in the building tonight. And another guy I think they're going to chase quite hard is DJ Hogue. He's another guy who, we talk about the Cairns Taipans potentially not being able to retain some of their key guys. Hogue is probably one of those. I'm under the impression he really does like it in Cairns and wouldn't be against a return. But I imagine a place like the Sydney Kings, record crowd tonight, would be one of those teams that chase him very hard, especially with Xavier Cooks leaving.
Let's start then with the Adelaide 36ers. Their depth chart is very interesting, D-Ruck, because they do have some re-signings coming back next season, but they have been the subject of speculation. What does the future look like for Mitch McCarron? If you believe some of the rumours, Adelaide are looking to try and move Mitch out. Similar for Anthony Drimmick. What do you make of this team as it stands right now?
It's a tough one right now for Adelaide because they've got to first determine what they're going to do with Mitch McCarron. They paid a hefty price for him to pry him away from Melbourne United a couple of years ago. Mitch has delivered in a sense, and he hasn't delivered also. So he's been a serviceable player, but at the price, he has probably not been good value. And then the Sixers, they have to determine what the structure, what the composition of that team is going to look like, what style they want to play. Now, I would think if they're able to come to some type of agreement with Mitch whereby he is released from his contract, then he kind of becomes second in line behind Will McDowell-White. And there's a place maybe in Brisbane for him. There's a place maybe at Southeast Melbourne. You know, there are a number of options for a guy like him that can do so many things with the basketball.
This was a rumor that started about a month ago, that the Sixers were potentially looking to offload Mitch McCarron, and I know a lot of teams right now are reaching out to the 36ers asking if that's true. I was told tonight pretty definitively that that is absolutely not happening. And so I fully expect Mitch McCarron to be in Adelaide 36ers uniform. You brought up Anthony Drimmick. I'm told that both parties opted out of that mutual option in order to renegotiate. But then I'm also told that they weren't able to come to a deal. And so Anthony Drimmick is going to hit the free agent market, coming off what I think some would consider one of his best seasons in the NBL, and so he's going to be hot property. One team, I imagine, will push quite hard for him, the Tasmania Jack Jumpers. They have a few openings with some of their guys hitting free agency, so I expect the Jack Jumpers to chase Drimmick quite hard.
And the other one, just quickly on Adelaide, is Robert Franks. So Antonius Cleveland under contract for next season. Robert Franks not at this stage.
No, I do not expect Robert Franks to be back. Antonius Cleveland will be back. Another player I don't expect back is Daniel Johnson. I'm under the impression that the Sixers don't have a desire to bring Daniel Johnson back. And so that changes the whole scheme of what the Sixers have been about for the past decade, right? And for a team that hasn't had a defensive identity for quite some time, it doesn't completely shock me that that's what I've been hearing.
I don't know, man. I don't know if that's a good move. Daniel Johnson is still one of the best offensive players at the position, and we can say what we want about his defensive liabilities, but how often in the regular seasons does defense really become a factor? And I thought there was some confusion in all the mayhem that was going on in Adelaide this year. I think Daniel was lost in terms of usage, but when he was utilized properly, I thought he was still pretty effective. When you look around the league, you would hate to see him go to another team, accept a role off the bench like Adelaide perhaps wants him to accept and thrive in that position and really, you know, uplift another team and come back to bite you. That's always my fear with a guy like Daniel Johnson.
To the Brisbane Bullets, it's going to be a change of the guard. New CEO, new coach. Everything is going to be brand new coming into next season. They're covered for big men. Aaron Baines and Terrell Harrison will be there next season. Nathan Sobey and DJ Mitchell as well. Olgun, from a news sense, what do you expect Brisbane to do? Do you think that they'll go young, given that that's the background of Justin Schuller, or will they be aggressive this time of year?
I'm under the impression that they're working with two minds, and so it's Stu Lash and Justin Schuller making these decisions. So in one sense, they have Aaron Baines and Nathan Sobey on significant money, and so in order to maximize those contracts, you have to try to maximize those players. And so that's what they're going to try to do in the short term. But they do have to have a long-term vision, and I'm under the impression that that's their focus when it's about locking up those ancillary guys, those local guys. And so expect a lot of two-year deals, and expect them to be really serious when it comes to those ancillary players on the market. You know, I mentioned an Anthony Drimmick. That sort of player is the type of guy who they're looking to bring in. One player who I'm told won't be returning is Tanner Krebs. They had interest in bringing him back, but I'm told that he's excited to test his value on the free agency market, and 2 teams there. I'm told Tasmania is interested in him as well. He's a hometown kid. I'm also told Melbourne United is interested in, will show interest in Tanner Krebs.
You know the Bullets better than just about anyone, D-Ruck. What happens next?
Well, I agree. Let's talk about Tanner Krebs. That's very similar to what I was talking about with Daniel Johnson. All of a sudden, Tanner Krebs is out there in a stable program, and he comes back to bite you because the guy has talent. He can play both ends of the floor. He's got good size. He's not afraid of any moment, and he plays with a lot of energy. So if Tanner goes somewhere else, I think he will really prosper. The Bullets, as an organization, obviously they've cleaned out the front office, so that's a whole new look, and hopefully that will inject some different decision-making into the program. But realistically, I was hoping that they were going to get Gak re-signed. It looks like he won't be back because of the signature of Tyrell Harrison, which is fine. You could only keep one of those 2, and they're both pretty efficient players. But the big thing is, will they go for an in-point point guard who can impact right away, like a Derek Walton Jr., a Jalen Adams, and so forth? And that's what I would like to know if you have any info on Olgun.
The answer is yes, they will. The priority going into free agency is for the Brisbane Bullets to get that high-level import point guard. They will also show significant interest in McDowell-White, who's from Brisbane, his family's there, and so that's the priority. It's something we've all been calling for such a long time, for this team to go and get a high-level point guard, and you need that to maximize Sobey and Baines. And so I fully expect them to go and chase that. One caveat on that is that Tyler Johnson does have an interest in returning, and that interest is somewhat mutual. If you spend that money on Tyler Johnson, then you probably can't get that high-level point guard. If they do bring in Johnson, then I fully expect them to go and chase maybe not as high-level a guy, but still an import point guard, and maybe a utility guy, someone who can defend, be a floor general, that sort of thing.
I've got 2 things on that. Firstly, Tyler Johnson, I had a lot of respect for what he did this season, guys. He was professional. Even when things were going really bad, he hung in there. And I thought in the final third of the season, he was one of the most efficient guards in the competition. Sobey was out injured for a stint, and Tyler really lifted. He figured out what was going on in the league, and I think he made a case for other teams to look at him as a viable free agent option. The other thing, though, and the big one, is Jason Kadee. Where does that leave Jason? Again, I really like what Jason's about, because I firmly maintain that you must have one exceptional citizen on your team, somebody who does everything. He's good on the court. He's good with the fans. He's good with the staff. He can be a sounding board for everyone. There's just so many bases you can cover with a player like Jason Kadee that I would not be willing to lose him from my program. And going forward post-career, those are the type of guys you want in your program. You know, I see Jason Kadee being sort of like a Tommy Greer down the road, and I think to lose him would be a mighty loss.
It's a big free agency period coming up for the Cairns Taipans. They made it through to the playoff series. Olgun, you mentioned DJ Hogue has interest in coming back, but certainly has interest elsewhere. Some of the other names that are up for grabs, Bull Quoll, Shannon Scott. It's a really important length of time for them.
It's going to be really tough for them, because I'm under the impression that they're going to be priced out of a lot of those guys. So when you look at Keanu Pinder, he's going to get significant interest around the league. It's going to be tough for the Taipans to keep him. I'm told that the offer they've put forward is pretty strong. And so there is a chance that they can keep him. But I'm under the impression that they'll be priced out of those conversations. And also Bull Quoll. You know, Bull Quoll will have interest from across the league. The Sydney Kings are expected to show interest. I expect the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix to show interest too. They've got team options on guys like Ben Ayre and Lat Mayen, which I fully expect them to pick up. But those high-level guys, it's tough to see them keeping them.
One sort of player that Cairns need. Don't worry so much about a name, Derek. What's the type of player that they need?
I think they need a big, tough, athletic big to even play, if they're able to retain Pinder, to play with him. I mean, I think an athletic guy that would take the physical burden and pressure game to game, day to day off of Keanu, I think that would go a long way towards helping their program.
Illawarra Hawks have got a fascinating season coming up. They've been busy already. Tyler Harvey under contract as we see their depth chart. Great to see Justin Robinson coming back after getting injured in the first game of the season. Sam Froling under contract as well. Where do they need to be looking, Derek? What sort of player, what fills this gap here for Jacob Jackomas?
They won 3 games last season. I'm rolling the dice. I'm going with something totally different. I'm going with the 3 guards, Robinson, Harvey, and I'm bringing back Fraser. I thought that he brought competitiveness. I think he has a chip on his shoulder, and I just like the vigor he played with. He was unlucky to get injured late in the season, and I would go out and try and get another local big from somewhere and just play that game. You're really relying on those 3 import guards to produce every night, and they're going to be playing a lot of minutes for me, and that's the way I would go. You can't try and beat everybody else when you're a small market team working on a restricted budget.
I'm under the impression that they are chasing a high-level 4-man to put next to Sam Froling, and I think I agree with that tack as well. When you look at the guys who are available, you look at a Keanu Pinder, Luke Travers, Finn Delaney, he's playing overseas right now. They're going to show interest in those guys. And they've been interviewing up until this point. They're preparing to interview a lot of high-level import fours as well. Mm-hmm. And so that would round out that starting lineup, and I think they're going to trust what Wani Swaka-Uluc can do. He's on a pretty significant contract, so they have to try and maximize that. And so it wouldn't surprise me if they slot him back into that starting lineup and hope for the best.
Melbourne United, their depth chart has a lot of holes in it right now because they've got a lot of re-signing to do. Chris Golding and Shea Ely, fingers crossed for Shea coming back next season. Firstly, to the big men department, are we thinking that Isaac Humphries will be elsewhere next season?
More than likely. The Melbourne United have, I'm told, a verbal agreement with Ariel Hakporti to return. So that's one big off the ranks. And then the other one they're interested in, they want to bring back Marcus Lee. It's very early in the piece, and if a deal is done with Lee, it would be further down the track, I'm under the impression. And so that's who they're looking to bring back, and obviously with the money locked in on those two, it's very tough to bring Humphries back in the mix.
Derek, what about Rajon Tucker? Had a great second half of the season. Would you be trying to get him back this time around?
Absolutely loved him, Jack. I thought he was one of the best imports in the second half of the season. He, again, like Tyler Johnson, he really started to understand the competition. A physical specimen of the highest magnitude. The guy can shoot the ball, he can put it on the deck, his defense is good, and his athleticism is elite NBA-type athleticism. If I were Melbourne United, I'd be trying to lock him up for multi-years.
New Zealand Breakers have got all 3 of their imports out of contract. They are another team that are going to be very busy. They're going to have their hands full keeping Will McDowell-White, as we've discussed. Olgun, where do you see them landing during this period?
It's really early. You know, they're one of those teams who are successful because they nailed all 3 imports. Yeah. And so as far as bringing those guys back, they all sort of overperformed, and so it would be tough to bring all of them back. You know, a lot of them are going to have significantly higher value. The key for them, I think, is retaining some of their locals. Someone like Tom Abercrombie, who I imagine will be back. They have interest in bringing Rob Lowe back. You know, these are guys who they need to bring back, and then obviously McDowell-White is the most significant piece to that puzzle.
I think at some point they've got to try and get a little bit younger and more athletic locally, not with the imports and not with the next stars. And I think, you know, that will kind of carry them on and not having that reliance on the imports. And look, you're right, these imports have done an outstanding job. If they can bring Brantley back, he will probably be my priority. Brantley, Brown, then Pardon. But New Zealand's in a very strong position. If I were Will McDowell-White, I would probably sign a 2-year deal and go back to New Zealand. I still think he probably needs another year or 2 to really learn the game, and Mody Maor has given him a good platform to show what his real talents are, and I think he can really learn to shoot that ball and score that ball a little bit better.
For the Sydney Kings, we've now learned in the last week that they will need to replace Xavier Cooks as he heads to the NBA and to chase his dream with the Washington Wizards. The other one there is Angus Glover. I'm interested in Olgun, where things sit with him right now.
Well, he's so interesting because his value is relatively high. It was high coming into this season, and I think he's had a pretty significant season. So I'm under the impression that there is mutual interest for a deal to be agreed on for him to come back, but that's way down the track. There are a lot of teams that are going to have interest in him. I'm told that the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix are one team who are expected to show a ton of interest in Angus Glover.
Angus Glover is a very valuable asset. He carried the Kings from the perimeter during a stretch late in that season where he was shooting the ball really well. Then the final 2 weeks he fell off a little bit, but now when it matters most in this championship series, he's delivering. He's a good defender, he shoots the ball well, and he's athletic, and we know he's got heart based on the physical things that he's come back from over the past 2 to 3 years. I like the guy, and he would be, again, a top priority signing if I were the Kings.
Let's take a look at the Perth Wildcats. Here's their depth chart now. Let's face it, it took a long time for things to click for Perth. When it eventually did, it looked pretty good at the back end of the season. One of the biggest names for them, no question about that, will be Luke Travers. What's happening there?
I'm told that the conversations between Luke Travers and the Perth Wildcats have been quite positive up until this point. I'm also told that Travers is going to take his time this free agency. It's the first time he's been a free agent, and so he's expected to get interest from practically every team in the league, and so there's a sense that he wants to sort of relish that, take it all in, and you know, treat free agency very seriously. It's the first time he's been a part of it, but in saying that, he's a Perth kid, does like it in Perth, and they're willing to invest more in him.
And I understand that. I think every player, especially if there's demand for your services, I think every player should go out and experience that free agent market. I think I did it once, and I really enjoyed it until it was time to make a decision. That can be very tough and can be very trying, especially when you have very good teams vying for your services and very influential coaches. So I think Travers should stay in Perth. I think John really was starting to find a means to use him effectively. And according to John, I had conversations with him. He thinks Mike Kelly is doing a very good job in developing Luke's jump shot, which was really good from deep late in the season. He was killing it from the three.
One more thing on Perth is I'm told that conversations are still ongoing with regard to Todd Blanchfield. He has 2 more years remaining on his contract, but there is mutual interest for a parting of ways of some sort. And so those conversations are ongoing. They're going to continue going. It's a tough buyout situation, but I imagine that's something that's going to come to a head at some point.
One for you, Derek, before we finish up on Perth. Both the Webster brothers have mutual options for next season. If you're in charge of Perth, what are you doing there?
I've made no bones about my feelings about the Webster brothers. I love them as players. Both are super creative and talented, but I don't think they're both good on the same team. So I would have to make a decision, one or the other. I probably lean towards Corey. Just out of the goodness of my heart, I think it's easier for Ty to find a spot in this competition, and I think I would roll with Corey to play with Bryce and whomever else you decide to put out there in the backcourt with those guys.
Southeast Melbourne Phoenix will be looking for a new coach, so it's a bit of a different look. We've got their depth chart, obviously, but they need to find a coach first and foremost. Olgun, how is that race looking at the moment?
That race is being extended out. They are taking their time, and it doesn't seem like it's a secret why. They're practically timing their search for a head coach with the end of the NBA season. And end of the NBA season means that someone like Trevor Gleeson, for example, becomes available effectively. And so I'm under the impression that once that time hits, then they'll more seriously go into those talks with someone like Gleeson, and that's the sort of name they're chasing.
Mitch Creek under contract, Alan Williams under contract for next season as well. Some question marks about Ryan Brockhoff and Kyle Adnams the other. On both of those players, if the deal was right, would you be bringing them back, Derek?
I think it might be a good opportunity for both the club and the player with respect to Kyle Adnam to move apart from each other. I think Kyle has kind of done his due there, and there are probably some places. Maybe if Mitch McCarron leaves, maybe Adelaide in a reserve role down there, it might be a spot for him. And look, the Phoenix weren't far off it. If they don't get those injuries about 2/3 of the way through the season, we have no idea what would happen. We don't know what's happening with Joe Chi. Maybe he comes back. But realistically, I think there's a chance there, if the right coach is hired, they can make moves. And Alan Williams is a very good player for this competition. We know what Creaky can do. If they can find the right guard combination, Brockhoff is just figuring his way out in the competition and starting to shoot the ball like we know he can.
I'm told the conversation with those two guys in particular will be stretched out to sort of coincide with that coaching search. And my impression is that the Brockhoff deal will likely get done, and that Adnam is likely on the way out.
Let's finish with the Tasmania Jack Jumpers. They've been very, very clear in the last week that they want Milton Doyle back playing at the Nest next season. Scott Roth has spoken publicly. Outside of that, they have Will Magnay under contract, Jack McVeigh under contract, Clint Steindl, Jared Bairstow. Where are they falling down at the moment, Derek? What sort of players should they be looking for?
Look, I think they are fine. They lack a little bit of athleticism. The guys that they've had the past 2 years, McIntosh and Kelly in that 4 spot, they've been solid players, but I think they need to ramp that up a little bit because both those guys went wanting when it got deep in the playoffs over the past 2 seasons. So if they can upgrade that position, get Doyle back, and then the other question mark is Majette. And I'm a bit torn because the guy leads a winning team, but yet he can be a bit erratic at times. His shooting percentage isn't great, but then he hits big shots. So I don't know. I could live either way with that one. But the bottom line is this is a team in its first 2 seasons that's got 2 top 4 finishers, so they're not far off.
The priority for Tasmania, and they've made this very clear, is Milton Doyle. Once they sort that out, then I think they'll sort the rest out. As of now, there's slim interest in bringing back Majette and Kelly. The priority is Milton Doyle, and they're going to keep going at that. One name that I'm told is returning, I'm told Fabian Krislovic is signing a 2-year deal to return to the Tasmania Jack Jumpers. So that'll get done. He was expected to have a ton of interest from around the league. But Tasmania, upped their price, gave him that extra year, so he'll be staying with the Jack Jumpers. Conversely, I'm told Sam McDaniel is opting out of his player option, and so he hits the free agency market. So right now we've got McDaniel and Anthony Drimmick hitting the free agency market. A team that I wouldn't be surprised enters the McDaniel sweepstakes are the Brisbane Bullets. He has a relationship with Justin Schuler. I think they can use a guy like him. I think he's a really solid guy to shore up a local crew. So it wouldn't surprise me if they're a team that shows interest in him.
One name I want to ask you about before we finish up on Tasmania, Isaac White. Patches of the season, he was in the rotation. Patches, he was out of the rotation. He can shoot and he can get hot, but he didn't seem to be permanently part of Scott Roth's rotation. Should he be looking elsewhere?
I would probably sit tight for another year if I were Isaac. He shows signs of being able to really come out and influence games. We know he can shoot the basketball, and I think it's a really good program for him. Look, the grass can be, you can think, oh yeah, I'll go there for an extra 10 or 15 grand. And at the end of the day, it's not really worth it. Stay where you are, continue to learn the game, find your niche, play hard, and win games.
The Jack Jumpers do have an interest in bringing Isaac White back, and they have extra roster spots that they can fill with him because he was a DP this season. But he will have interest from across the league, I'm told. I look at a team like Melbourne United, a team like the Brisbane Bullets, maybe the Sydney Kings. These are teams that I expect to show interest in Isaac White, and so Corey Homicide Williams said it, his price is going up. Like a multi-year deal is maybe on the table, and so there'll be interest around the league for someone like Isaac White.
As you can see, we have got a lot happening during this free agency period. Thank you so much for joining us on The Marketplace. Derek, thanks for your thoughts. We'll talk to you across the period.
Thank you, Jack.
And Olgun, you are going to be a very busy boy, so we'll catch you across the period as well.
Thank you, Jack.
You can stay up to date, of course, with all of the latest free agency news on nbl.com.au and across all of the NBL social media platforms. The Marketplace will be with you right throughout the free agency period.